Was he Paul to you, or was he Beatle Paul?
Paul is always a Beatle. Always a Beatle. I think he misses tremendously the camaraderie and the chemistry that they had in those early days, and he still tries to regurgitate it. That's probably the wrong way of saying it, regurgitate. He wants to relive it. He's still at his happiest if he got in a transit van, with 4 other guys, and went and did the gigs that we were all doing around Liverpool and Manchester in those days. That he gets off on that, just seeing a crowd in front of him and playing as superbly as he can do. Even now, he still plays superbly. What a bass player. And that voice is fantastic. So, gosh, when somebody like that asks you to work with him, and initially I think I was sort of on a test thing. I was just asked in as a friend to do some vocals and some guitar work on Tug of War with Michael Jackson, and Pipes of Peace with Stevie Wonder on, things like that, and all these people around this wonderful chemistry that was all being controlled by this wonderful headmaster, George Martin, and with Jeff Emerick on the board, breaking all the rules of engineering, which I adored because I love engineering, and I want to find out how the Beatles got that sound. And he just used to push everything, and the faders were up at full, and the needles were going bang, bang, bang against the side. I said, it's going into distortion. He said, does it sound distorted? I said, well, no, it sounds great. He said, well, all right, don't watch the needles. Just listen to it. And it's just limited to hell. Crash, crash, crash. Anyway, I loved doing that. And then eventually, I think it was Linda who said to me, you can write songs, can't you? You've written some nice songs. Well, why don't you write some with Paul? I'm sure he'd be pleased. I said, I'd love to. I'd be honoured to. You don't get Paul McCartney asking you to write a song with you every day. And this is a fantastic trip for me. And we went down and we wrote together very, very quickly. We got on together. Maybe it was this Northern Roots thing we both had, this appreciation of all the early rock stuff that I was talking about, the Buddy Hollies and the early Presley stuff. Maybe that was coming through both of us while we were writing. I don't think we wrote anything absolutely fabulous, but I had some great fun recording it with him.
Well, Footprints was one of those songs, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I do think Footprints is a fantastic song with a brilliant production. There's that swelling kind of synthy chimes thing that goes on. The echoes away. That's gorgeous, that is.
I remember writing that song. The snow was about 2 feet deep, but I managed to get to his farm, and I was living near Sevenoaks. And he was so pleased that I'd actually turned up. I got there, and we sat down. I said, "What are we going to write about?" He said, "Well," I said, "It's beautiful outside." And he said something like, "Well, there are footprints in the snow. Did you see them? There's been a fox or something." We started talking, and the song just developed like that. And we wrote very quickly. We didn't sort of get trapped in any sort of, what are we going to say next? It was just little suggestions like that.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to sit at the piano with him myself and side by side and just tinkering, not writing. But obviously, bearing in mind both of us having this kind of early love of the Beatles and the other musics that we were interested in. Paul's a real person. You can see that with your own eyes. But when you're actually sitting next to them, it's like and especially if you're writing like that, it's a real head thing.
Yeah, it is a hell of a head trip to be sitting there with someone who's had that much influence on you. And even now, thinking about it later, in retrospect, it was a phenomenally exciting time to do what you're talking about now, and to think a little bit further back to the way I'd been influenced by him. And I don't think there'd have been anyone else on the planet that I would rather have sat down and wrote a song with. It's very true. Those two guys together. But just going back to what you said a few minutes ago, I still think Paul was a Beatle. And this solo thing, he tried many different guises with Wings and bringing other people in. But I was noticing that most people didn't last more than one album. They went away, after the Wings thing sort of disintegrated. So I think the creativity of him and John together, the chemistry of those two guys together, was the most important thing in his life. And without John there to say it couldn't get much worse, sort of nullified his creative ability to show him that he could write something better than him. And there's this lovely competition going on. How daft can we get?
You wonder as well, I think, just in the scale of things, whether what they achieved was sustainable. I mean, if you go from 1962 to like 1970, 71, that's a hell of a long time to be at the top of your game, right? It's a long time to be at the top of your game. So probably it would have tailed off anyway to some degree, I should think. It certainly did with John, didn't it? I mean, John's stuff is, no one dares say it, but if you cull together the best bits of John's stuff after the Beatles, you just about get kind of long one album out of it.
Yeah, I couldn't even do that. There were probably for me about 4 songs that I would say were of the quality of the Beatles. And you're going to have Imagine, of course, and Jealous Guy, and maybe two or three others. But a lot of it was messing around.
Well, everyone talks about John's influence on Paul, but when I look at Paul, for me, the things that I love about the Beatles, whether it's the tape loops or the experimenting, it usually comes from Paul. He did most of that work, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. He wanted to experiment. He would try so many different ideas that we would never consider until they'd done them. And that's the lovely thing. It is when somebody really gets something going that is unusual, like they did, you want to take it further. And I'm repeating myself again, but other groups like Floyd took off in that way, maybe in the spacey LSD direction, and came up with Dark Side of the Moon, which is phenomenal. Their influence is phenomenal.
Yes. There are some negative impacts, of course, and one of the things that struck me as the most obvious and brutal negative is what happened to George when he was attacked at home, and of course what happened to John, neither of which would have happened if they hadn't been in the Beatles, but ironically. They really paid for that. If I got the story right, you were with Paul when John was killed, is that right? You were working with him then, weren't you? What was the situation at the time? Have I got that right? That's the way I got it in my head anyway.
No, I wasn't actually with him when John was killed. I had been doing sessions with them, but I wasn't with him at that moment in time. But we went to Strawberry South, our southern studio at Dorking, to record Stevie Wonder. I got there earlier, and George was there, and Paul came in, and then I remember him sitting down and saying to me, "John's dead. John's dead." He said, "It's just come home to me that I'm not going to see him again. He's dead. He's actually dead." And I don't know what you can really say to that. We all said, yeah. I think at that moment in time, it just actually hit him. Maybe how much his creative repartee meant to Paul.
Do you think they'd ever work together again?
No, I don't think so. I don't think they ever would. I think Paul would have worked with John, yes. But John had gone, as you said, he'd got off on another planet, John. And doing really, really heavy drugs. John really did get badly, badly screwed up, and he was doing heroin and so alien. Although he cleaned himself up quite well, hadn't he, by the time?